All right, I got to show you with this, guys. So if you do not follow @based hypnotist, fellow called Jason Andrews on Twitter, now called X, you are missing a fantastic show. I want to go through one of the threads that he posted just a few days ago because there's so much goodness here. And I'm going to emphasize what he has bolded and or italicized for you. All right, so he begins it. An experiment in polite belief change. Read through to the end. Most liberals will find it hard. My wife's cousins are, generally speaking, far left liberals. One married into a wealthy family. Another, who worked for Facebook, is childless. A third married a vegan cyclist who has always worked for the federal government his entire career. These are smart, capable people, but just can't understand why anyone would want to vote conservative, in italics. Now, I tend to explore things from multiple perspectives, and usually what I discover is that almost any thought process is defensible when you look at things from another's perspective. Plus, I have a strong instinct to play devil's advocate and disrupt some sacred cows. We all were at a nice dinner, and I sat across from government vegan cyclist, who is white. We'll call him WGV. And next to childless Facebook guy who is Indian, whom we'll call ICF. Indian childless Facebook, and then WGV for white government vegan. I waited for the right moment. Let the games begin. Sure enough, eventually the conversation turned to Donald Trump. Now, there is a guy who generates strong feelings in both directions. And it generated some pretty strong feelings in white government vegan and Indian childless Facebooker. Trump is so racist, said white government vegan, and he incites all these racist people to vote for him. He really needs to be stopped. He just hates people who aren't white, said Indian childless Facebooker knowingly. Yeah, it's really unfortunate that half the country is racist, I said. I mean, half the country votes for him every election, and can you imagine? Literally 1 out of every 2 people in this country are white supremacists? There was a pause. No, it's a fact, I said. Think about it, I said. Trump's done all those racist things, right? Of course, said white government vegan. Dozens, said Indian childless Facebooker. Okay, let's take an example. Give me the most racist thing Trump ever did. You know, that one thing, I said. There was another pause. No one said anything. I smiled on the inside. Well, everyone knows he did lots of racist things, so we don't need any examples. We could get lots of examples if we wanted. How could anyone support the bad things without being a white supremacist? I watched them go inside and find some exceptions in italics. I don't know if they're all white supremacists, said white government vegan, but Trump voters are definitely all racists. Okay, fine, I said. Maybe they're not white supremacists, but yeah, definitely racists because of all the racist things. I mean, 3 million black people voted for Trump last time. 3 million black white supremacists in the US. How messed up is that? Said Indian childless Facebooker. Many black voters don't really understand what's happening, said white government vegan. They have no internet access, no government ID, lots of struggling single moms, many are on drugs, they don't have time or enough information to choose correctly. Well, I don't know about that, I said. But then you look at the fact that 1 in 5 Hispanics voted for Trump, even though he's so racist, I said. It's internalized racism, said white government vegan. Our system makes POCs hate themselves. Well, I can't read their minds, I said, but they must have their reasons. White government vegan continued. People are struggling. The people at the bottom of the importance ladder. The people who have been wronged for decades for no fault of their own. They've been out of good schools. They get discriminated against in employment. Their communities have been ravaged by drugs. Their traditional ways of life have been disrupted, and they haven't gotten the proper funding or attention to fix their problems. And they're angry. Said Indian childless Facebooker. I kept going. And it just boggles my mind that 1/3 of Asians voted for him. That means there are 3 million Asian white supremacists. How does that even work? White supremacy, it's not just for whites anymore. White government vegan laughed. Many Asians and Indians are here on work visas and don't speak the language well enough to understand. Said Indian childless Facebooker. Well, I think it's disgusting that so many people think the wrong things, I said. White government vegan got heated at this. Exactly. They must be stopped or bad things are going to happen. I hate how Trump is manipulating all these vulnerable minorities to do things against their own interests. Why don't they realize they are serving as his useful idiots? Well, I don't know about that, I said. Said Indian childless Facebooker. The topic of conversation changed after that, but Indian childless Facebooker was a bit quieter after that exchange. I caught him looking at white government vegan a couple of times with an unreadable expression. I wonder if he began to think about the real motivation of white liberals, italicized. I wouldn't have been surprised. If you like this thread, feel free to repost the first one. And if you're sensing there's something more going on under the hood here, you're right. And then Jason posts an advertisement. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to jasonandrews.coach. He does good stuff at Base Hypnotist, Jason Andrews on Twitter, now called X. Now, what is so fascinating to me about that exchange is in order to cause the Indian coworker of Jason's to feel differently about the whole situation, previously having agreed with the one friend, is Jason embraced and amplified. So he embraced the white government vegan individual, this peer of his. He embraced that man's position and amplified it a little too loudly for the Indian man, a little too loudly. But the idea was that he allowed the quote-unquote white government vegan individual to make it clear what he really thinks, which is that he demonstrated an extreme amount of bigotry towards non-white people. And that likely caused the Indian man to break out of that frame and realize, wait a second, opposition to Trump is literally white supremacy. Oh dear. Because that's what he witnessed in real time. The embrace and amplify, this resonates with what I said yesterday about the Washington Redskins example, where those who go right for the position of moral authority and believe themselves to be the arbiters of what's good and right and what's just and what's fair, if you use their language, if you use their principles, if you use their frame, you can use it better than they do, and you can break it. And we talked about anchoring. We talked about the idea of linguistic anchors, vocabulary anchors, word anchors. Now, with this, with what Jason said, it's a little bit different. It's less about anchors, and it's more about agreeing with it and then going really far into it. I don't know that he used any word anchors there, but it was more so arguing to the absurd, which is, well, Trump is a white supremacist, right? Oh, well, of course, that's what every good and moral authority, everyone who's a good person and has a moral authority, right? Liberals like to say, just be a good effing person. They like to say this a lot. Just be kind, just be nice. They use this sort of language. And I think it's to disguise intent and agenda, which is not that. It's a sort of end justifies the means. Well, as long as we believe ourselves to be good, kind, nice, loving, and peaceful people, we can do what we need to do in order to enforce you being good, kind, loving, and nice, so on and so forth, peaceful. So when Jason says that white supremacy is not just for whites anymore, well, the only reason you could support him, regardless of what race you are, is that you're literally just a bad person. Well, then I guess you are, right? Because that is the position. And then when you embrace that position and amplify it, meaning you make it louder, you make it clearer. That's what the embrace and amplify argument is you make it way clearer what it is that you're arguing for. So I've noticed that there have been quite a few people who have had their minds changed around terminating pregnancies on this particular issue, or rather this particular technique where you embrace that position. And the embracing of it is to loudly and thoroughly agree with this whole it's just a choice concept. And we should be able to choose death because that's freedom. And so then you begin making, well, if this life isn't really life, well, then when does it become life? Well, after the 4th trimester, talk about a fourth trimester termination of pregnancy. You know what I'm talking about, right? I don't need to get into details there. You can even argue for that. You can make the case for that. The moral case using their own moral frame, which is just hideous and absurd and is, I think, universally agreed upon murder. But if that is their position, that life becomes life when it's convenient for me and when I want it, then it doesn't, like, wait a second. Why is it that a pregnant woman who loses a pregnancy as a result of domestic violence, why is the perpetrator of domestic violence charged for murder? Well, because we know that. Even that is an interesting question to ask. But what worked for Jason was not trying to like break the logic or like to disagree. It was putting on. It was embracing it. It was amplifying it. We did that a little bit with the Redskins Persuasion yesterday, where we're embracing the position of Indigenous rights, Indigenous people's voices and representation, and educate, not eradicate, so on and so forth, and all of that. But the idea was to change the meaning of words, is to pull up some anchors, particularly around like the word red and skins, and the fact that it's referring to red ochre paint, in the same way that the Blackfeet tribe, it was not referring to them as having black skin, but the fact that they painted their feet, their ankles, and their lower legs black. And that was just part of what they did as a custom. What I love about this Embrace and Amplify is that it is workable, it's usable in every position, and it will probably not convince the true believers. In fact, it might convince them even more of their correctness. So it's not for the person you're talking to directly, it's for anyone who's listening. That's what the case was with the white government vegan who, the cyclist. I think this is an individual who probably possesses a sense of moral authority unlike any saint even. But it was for the benefit of the Indian man who was listening, the Indian childless Facebooker, as Jason described him. I believe it was for that man's benefit. And what it caused was to completely destabilize the structure of moral authority that he had assigned his colleague, the white government vegan character. By him demonstrating open bigotry and saying that to oppose, to vote for Trump and to not be white is because of reasons associated with your race. Wait a second, you just did a racism. So the only person in the conversation who's doing a racism is the anti-Trumper. There's no Trump or pro-Trump racism happening anywhere in that conversation. What's funny, of course, is Jason said, well, we could get any example. We get many examples. Like, what's the single most thing he ever did? And of course, nobody can ever think of anything because there isn't anything. But the point is that this is a narrative and he's questioning and he's breaking it. I'll go ahead and end this right here with this challenge for you. Next time you are with two or more people who you know disagree with you, embrace and amplify and see what happens. And the key is no disagreement, but extreme agreement. You clarify and you make it clear. But you have to have done your homework on this, whether it's about Trump or it's about something else. You have to have done your homework here. Absolutely. Because you have to be able to know, like Jason did, what the percentage was, like with the 1 in 5 Hispanic people, for example, or however many millions of black white supremacists there are in the country based on black Trump supporters, or Trump voters, rather. So this is the stuff that you need to know. You have done this homework ahead of time. So also keeping your emotional frame, meaning keeping your composure. It's kind of like that game where you are trying to make another person laugh and the person who laughs first loses. You want to be like the person who doesn't laugh. That is your emotional position. That's your countenance. Play it up and do an embrace and amplify, for sure. And it's for the benefit of the one person who's not the true believer, or to see if there even isn't one, a true believer. Maybe neither of them are, and maybe both of them will find themselves arguing for your actual but unstated position right here. And then you, as the conversation goes on, you might allow them to change your mind. That's pretty good. Yeah.